The school hallway was buzzing with the usual chaos of a Monday morning. Lockers slammed, friends laughed and chatted, and the faint smell of cafeteria food lingered in the air. Students were moving in groups, some hurrying to class, others lingering in the crowd trying to catch up on the latest gossip. Among them walked a black teenage girl, carrying her backpack firmly over one shoulder, her head held high. She was tall for her age, with a graceful posture and eyes that shone with determination. Her hair, a crown of thick, natural curls, had always been a source of pride for her, something she cared for meticulously every day. It was more than just hair. It was part of her identity, part of who she was, part of the story she carried with her every step. For weeks, she had noticed a group of students whispering and laughing in her direction. She tried to ignore them, focusing on her studies and her friends, but today was different. As soon as she stepped into the main hallway, she felt their eyes on her. A sharp voice broke the chatter around her, followed by giggles. "Hey, look at her hair," one of them shouted. The words were meant to sting, filled with cruelty and a judgment that had no place in the world, but they found their target. She froze for a brief second, unsure whether to respond, but her pride kept her moving forward. The group of bullies, 3 in number, circled around her like predators. They were loud, confident, and mean, feeding off each other's cruelty. One of them reached out, grabbing a strand of her hair. "This is ugly," he sneered, tugging slightly. "Who even does this? It's a joke." She pulled back instinctively, her heart racing, but the circle closed in tighter. Another girl laughed, pulling out a pair of scissors from her backpack. "Let's see how it looks after a little trim," she said, her tone playful but deadly. The scissors glinted in the harsh fluorescent lights above, and a cold dread settled into her chest. Fear and shock froze her for a moment. She couldn't believe this was happening. She had seen bullying before, even heard rumors about this group, but she never imagined she would be their target. She wanted to yell, to push them away, but the words got stuck in her throat. Her mind raced. Should she fight back? Should she run? But the crowded hallway made it impossible to escape without drawing attention, and she knew confrontation could only escalate things. She tried to step back, but the bullies blocked her path, circling closer with a cruel grin. Before she could react, one of them snipped a small chunk of her hair. The sharp sound of scissors cutting through thick curls felt like a shockwave. Her hands went to her head automatically, trying to stop the damage, but they were too late. The group laughed, mocking her reactions, tossing her hair around like it was a trophy. Tears welled up in her eyes, not just because of the pain, but because of the humiliation. It wasn't just a haircut. It was an attack on her identity, on something deeply personal that no one had the right to touch. Other students around them whispered and stared, some frozen in shock, others pretending not to notice. No one stepped in. She felt completely alone, surrounded by people but utterly isolated. The humiliation was suffocating, each laugh and cruel comment cutting deeper than the scissors ever could. "Wow, you look even worse now," one of them taunted. "Maybe now you'll finally look normal." The words hit her like a slap. Her pride, her confidence, the careful way she presented herself all seemed to crumble in that moment. Eventually, the bullies stepped back, satisfied with their cruelty. They walked away, leaving her standing there, her hair uneven, her shoulders slumped, and her eyes brimming with tears. She tried to steady herself, but every step felt heavy, weighed down by embarrassment and rage. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the crowd, but she knew she had to get to her next class. Slowly, she moved forward, feeling every stare and whisper follow her, a reminder that the world could be cruel and unkind in ways she wasn't ready to face. By the time she reached the end of the hallway, she felt numb. The laughter of the bullies had faded into the background, replaced by a tight knot of emotions in her chest. Anger, sadness, fear, and disbelief all mixed together. She kept her head down as she walked to her classroom, hoping no one would approach her, hoping the day would somehow pass without more incidents. But inside, a storm was brewing. She felt a fire ignite in her heart, a mix of indignation and determination. She wasn't going to let this define her, but in that moment she didn't know how to respond. When she finally reached the safety of the classroom, she sat at her desk, trying to pull herself together. Her hands shook slightly as she touched her hair, running her fingers through the uneven strands. Her reflection in the window showed her teary eyes and the small patch of hair that had been cut. It felt like a wound she could carry with her, invisible but deeply painful. She wanted to cry, to scream, to tell someone what had happened, but the words felt heavy and awkward. All she could do was sit there, her mind spinning with questions. Why did they do this? Was it because of her skin color? Was it something about her that made them target her? The questions had no answers, only a gnawing feeling of injustice that seemed impossible to shake. By the time school ended, she had not spoken to anyone about what had happened. She walked out of the building quietly, her backpack pulled tight against her, feeling the weight of the day on her shoulders. The streets outside were busy, cars honking, people walking quickly to get home, but she felt detached from it all. Every step felt heavy. When she finally reached home, the first thing she did was run to her room and lock the door. She didn't want anyone to see her like this. Not her friends, not her teachers, not even her family. She sat on her bed, hugging her knees to her chest, trying to make sense of the humiliation, the fear, and the anger all at once. Her father knocked gently on the door. "Can I come in?" he asked. His voice was calm, steady, but she knew he could sense something was wrong. She didn't answer at first, just hugged herself tighter. After a few moments, he opened the door slowly, his presence filling the room. "Hey," he said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Something happened at school today, didn't it?" She finally looked at him, tears streaming down her face, and nodded. They cut my hair," she whispered, her voice trembling. The words felt small compared to the weight of the moment, but her father understood immediately. He didn't ask why, he didn't question her. He simply pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly, letting her cry without interruption. Her father had always been a figure of strength and discipline. A former Navy SEAL, he had faced some of the most dangerous situations imaginable. Yet he now knelt beside her, offering the kind of comfort and understanding that only a parent could provide. He knew this was more than just a haircut. He understood the deeper wound, the attack on her dignity, her identity, and her sense of safety. He held her until her sobs quieted, until the trembling in her hands and shoulders began to fade. "It's not your fault," he said firmly. "What they did says more about them than it does about you. You are strong, and this doesn't change who you are." After a long moment, she pulled back slightly, wiping her tears. "But it feels, I don't know, wrong. Like they took something from me," she admitted. Her father nodded, understanding completely. "They did something cruel, yes. But they didn't take your strength. They didn't take your heart, your mind, your spirit. You are still you, and that is something no one can ever touch." He sat with her for hours, listening as she recounted every detail, the taunts, the laughter, the way the scissors had felt in her hair. He didn't interrupt, didn't rush her, simply allowed her to speak and express everything bottled up inside. Then as the evening wore on, he began to share with her some lessons he had learned through his own life and training. Lessons about resilience, about facing fear, about controlling what you can and letting go of what you cannot. He didn't sugarcoat the world or pretend it was safe. But he also showed her that she could rise above cruelty, that she could face injustice with courage. By the time night fell, she felt a little lighter, though the sting of what happened still lingered. She knew the next day would bring more challenges, perhaps even more encounters with the same bullies, but she also knew she was not alone, that she had a guide in her father, someone who had taught her not only survival but how to stand tall in the face of adversity. That night, as she went to sleep, she made a silent promise to herself. She would not let fear define her. She would not let humiliation win, and she would find a way to reclaim her power, one step at a time. The next morning, the house was quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes when everyone is still waking up. The teen woke slowly, feeling the weight of yesterday pressing on her chest. She had tried to sleep, had tossed and turned, but her mind kept replaying the scene over and over. The laughter, the scissors, the feeling of being trapped and powerless. Even now, as she sat on the edge of her bed, she could almost hear the taunts echoing in her mind. She brushed her fingers through her hair, now uneven and patched, and felt a pang of sadness. She didn't want to face anyone, but she also couldn't hide forever. Her father entered the room quietly, holding 2 mugs of warm cocoa. "Morning," he said softly. "I made this for you. Thought it might help start the day a little easier." She didn't respond at first, simply taking the mug and wrapping her hands around it, feeling the warmth seep into her palms. She wasn't much of a morning person, and yesterday's events had made waking up even harder. He sat down beside her, careful not to crowd her, letting her know he was there, ready to listen, "You're quiet today," he said gently. "Do you want to talk?" She hesitated, swirling the cocoa in her mug. The steam rose, curling in front of her face, almost hiding her expression. I don't know how to face everyone," she admitted, her voice small. "I feel like they took something from me." Her father nodded, understanding without judgment. "I know it feels that way. But remember, what they did doesn't change who you are inside. You're still strong and you're still you. It's just a challenge you have to face, not a mark on your character." The teen listened but still felt the knot of worry in her stomach. School wasn't just a place for learning math or history. It was a place full of social pressure, unspoken rules, and in her case, cruelty. She thought about her friends. Some had tried to comfort her, but she couldn't bring herself to explain everything. Some adults would call it resilience, but to her it felt like pretending to be okay when everything inside was raw and painful. She sighed, setting the mug down. "I don't know if I can do it," she said quietly. Her father put a hand on her shoulder. "You can, and you will. But first, you need to understand that you have more control than you think." Over the next few days, the house became a place of learning in a different way. Her father, with patience and care, began teaching her how to manage her emotions and strengthen her mind. They started with simple breathing exercises, ways to calm down when anger or fear threatened to overwhelm her. At first, it felt strange, almost silly to sit still and focus on breathing, but soon she noticed it helped her feel grounded. Her racing thoughts slowed, her panic eased, and for the first time since the incident, she felt a small flicker of control returning. Her father also spoke about confidence, not the kind that comes from looking good or winning popularity contests, but the kind that comes from knowing your own worth. He told her stories from his time in the Navy SEALs, not about missions or weapons, but about staying calm under pressure, making decisions in difficult situations, and the importance of preparation. "It's not about fighting," he explained. "It's about being ready. It's about knowing how to react without letting fear take over." She listened intently, absorbing the lessons like a sponge. It was a new world for her, one where strength wasn't just physical, it was mental and emotional too. Meanwhile, her father made sure the school was aware of the incident. He didn't want her to feel powerless, and he wanted her to know that adults could step in when necessary. He spoke with the principal and the school counselor, explaining what had happened without exaggeration. He didn't just demand punishment. He asked for awareness, for measures to prevent it from happening again. Her parents knew that change wouldn't happen overnight, but it was important for her to see that action was being taken. She felt a sense of relief knowing that she wasn't alone, that someone was standing up for her in the ways that mattered. Despite this support, school was still intimidating. Every morning she faced the mirror and examined her uneven hair, a reminder of what had happened. She knew some students were talking about her, some probably still laughing at the incident, but her father's words echoed in her mind. Strength comes from preparation, not revenge. She decided to approach the situation differently. She couldn't erase what had happened, but she could control how she reacted. She could choose courage over fear, strategy over panic. To help her prepare, her father introduced small exercises in situational awareness. They would walk in the neighborhood or at the park, and he would point out ways to notice potential threats, ways to move confidently through a space without looking scared. "It's not about being suspicious," he explained. "It's about being aware so you're never caught off guard." At first she thought it was unnecessary. She didn't live in a dangerous place. But soon she realized it wasn't about danger, it was about confidence. The more she noticed her surroundings, the more she felt in control. Her steps became steadier, her posture straighter, her eyes sharper. It was subtle, but it mattered. Alongside mental training, her father encouraged small physical exercises. Not to harm anyone, not to seek revenge, but to build her confidence in her presence. Push-ups, stretches, and balance exercises became part of her daily routine. She noticed that her body felt stronger, more capable. When she looked in the mirror, it wasn't just her hair she saw. It was a posture of someone who was learning to stand tall again, even after being knocked down. Every small victory, from holding her balance to taking a deep, steady breath under stress, felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. At home, her mother and siblings provided emotional support too. They listened when she needed to talk, distracted her with games or stories when she needed a break, and reminded her of her worth every single day. Her younger sibling, in particular, would often run up to her and say, "Don't let them win. You're awesome." The simplicity of the words was powerful. It reminded her that sometimes courage comes from love, from family, from knowing that people see your value even when the world tries to diminish it. Her friends were also there, quietly supportive, though she didn't always want to talk about the incident. Some of them offered hugs, some offered words, and some simply sat beside her in silence. She realized that support didn't always need to be loud. It could be a steady presence, a reminder that she wasn't facing this alone. That realization brought her comfort, even if fear still lingered in her chest like a shadow. School still brought challenges. Hallways were crowded, whispers and glances still followed her, and she had moments of doubt. But the difference now was subtle and important. She no longer felt completely powerless. When a student glanced at her with mockery, she straightened her back, met the gaze without fear, and walked on. She wasn't aggressive, she wasn't confrontational, but she was aware. She was present. She had begun to reclaim her space. Her father emphasized something critical. She didn't need to seek revenge. She didn't need to prove anything to the bullies. Her strength came from being prepared, from remaining calm, from knowing that she could handle whatever came her way. "The world will always have people who try to hurt you," he said one evening as they practiced mental exercises at home. "The difference is you can choose how much power you give them. You can choose to stay strong. You can choose to rise above." Those words became a mantra in her mind, repeated silently whenever fear threatened to creep back in. As the days passed, the combination of mental exercises, physical routines, and emotional support slowly transformed her. She still felt anger and sadness, but those emotions were no longer paralyzing. They became fuel, a reason to prepare, a reason to grow. She began to understand that strength wasn't just about responding to cruelty. It was about building herself up, step by step, in ways that no one could take away. By the end of the week, she felt ready in a way she hadn't before. Not just to face the bullies, but to face the world with renewed confidence. She had learned that vulnerability didn't mean weakness, that pain didn't mean defeat, and that preparation could turn fear into courage. Each day had been a small lesson, a reminder that strength is cultivated over time, not given freely. And most importantly, she realized that she wasn't alone. She had her family, her friends, and her own growing resilience guiding her forward. The weekend arrived, bringing a sense of relief from the tense school days. But the teen didn't spend it in idle relaxation. She had grown restless, fueled by a desire to feel stronger, more in control, and ready for whatever challenges might come next. Her father noticed the determination in her eyes and decided it was time to take her training to a new level. Not training to fight, he explained, but training to handle herself, to act with confidence, and to never feel powerless again. They began the morning with a review of situational awareness, something her father had introduced in small doses before. He explained it again, slowly, carefully, making sure she understood that it wasn't about being afraid of the world, but about being alert, knowing her surroundings, and predicting potential problems before they happened. They started with their own home, walking slowly through the rooms, pointing out escape routes, noting blind spots, and practicing moving calmly but confidently. "It's not about expecting trouble," he said. "It's about being ready if it comes." She nodded, understanding that preparation gave her a sense of control, and control gave her confidence. After they practiced at home, her father took her to a nearby park. The place was quiet at first, with only a few joggers and parents with young children, but he wanted her to experience real-world situations. "See everything around you," he instructed. "Notice who is coming toward you, how they walk, the way people carry themselves. Small details matter. They tell you a lot." At first she felt overwhelmed, unsure how to notice everything without getting distracted, but her father guided her patiently. Slowly she began to see patterns, the way people moved, how groups tended to interact, which areas of the park were busier than others. Each observation, no matter how small, made her feel stronger. Physical training followed. Her father didn't want to teach her aggression or violence. Instead, he focused on strength, balance, and confidence in movement. They started with simple exercises, push-ups, squats, stretches, and runs. Her muscles ached at first, but the ache was satisfying. It reminded her she was building something. After weeks of mental exercises, the physical work added a new layer of confidence. She realized that her body could respond to stress, could move with strength, and that movement itself could give her courage. Next, her father introduced defensive techniques, not to hurt anyone, but to protect herself if she was ever in danger again. They practiced ways to break free from a grab, how to use leverage instead of brute force, and how to create space between herself and someone aggressive. Each motion was deliberate, measured, and controlled. Her father emphasized calm over panic, technique over strength, thinking over reaction. "Remember," he said, "your goal is to protect yourself and stay safe. Not to fight, not to hurt, just to be prepared." She absorbed every word, repeating the movements, practicing until they became second nature. While they trained, her father also spoke to her about confidence in social situations. He explained that much of bullying relied on intimidation, on projecting fear, and that a calm, firm presence could deter even the most aggressive individuals. They practiced posture, eye contact, and speaking clearly without anger. At first she felt awkward, but gradually she noticed a change. She carried herself differently, and the subtle adjustments made her feel more in control. It wasn't about showing off or being aggressive. It was about reclaiming her space, asserting herself without a word if necessary. Back at home, they reviewed what had happened at school again, step by step. Her father asked questions. What did they do first? How did you react? What did you notice about them? She recounted the incident carefully, remembering each laugh, each snicker, each movement. Her father pointed out things she hadn't noticed in the heat of the moment, details that could help her understand patterns and prevent future surprises. He explained that noticing small cues, tone of voice, facial expressions, body language, could give her valuable information about someone's intentions. It was like training her mind to be alert and thoughtful, even under stress. Her mother noticed the change in her demeanor too. At breakfast one morning, she commented on how poised her daughter seemed, even while pouring cereal. "You carry yourself differently," she said. "There's a new confidence about you." The teen smiled shyly but inwardly felt proud. She had come a long way from the frightened girl in the hallway, feeling trapped and humiliated. Each exercise, each conversation, each small victory added up. She was building resilience, slowly but steadily, learning that strength wasn't just about physical ability. It was about control, awareness, and presence. Her friends noticed the change too. At school, she walked with a steadier pace, her head held high, and she didn't flinch when people whispered or stared. She realized that some of the fear she had felt before came from imagining reactions, not just experiencing them. When a friend offered a supportive nod or a smile in the hallway, it reminded her that she had allies, people who cared, and that she didn't have to face everything alone. Even in moments of uncertainty, she found herself relying on the mental tools her father had taught her: steady breathing, calm observation, and deliberate response. The weekend also became a time for reflection. At night, she would sit by her window, thinking about what had happened and what she had learned. She realized that anger, while natural, was not the most useful tool. Fear, while understandable, could be managed, and humiliation, while painful, could be transformed into motivation. She began to write small notes to herself, reminders of what she had accomplished and what she wanted to achieve. "I am strong," one note read. "I can handle this." Another said, "I am in control of my mind, my body, my choices." Each note reinforced the lessons she was learning, helping her internalize them. Her father also encouraged her to practice visualization. She would close her eyes and imagine walking through the school hallway, facing the bullies calmly and confidently. She pictured herself moving with grace, responding with words or actions that didn't escalate the situation but made her presence felt. The more she practiced, the more real it felt until it became almost second nature. Visualization, her father explained, was a way to prepare the mind for situations before they happened, reducing fear and increasing confidence. She found it surprisingly effective, and it became a key part of her preparation. As the weekend drew to a close, she began to feel ready, not invincible, not fearless, but prepared. The combination of mental exercises, physical training, family support, and visualization had transformed her. She felt capable of facing the bullies again, not with anger, but with awareness and confidence. Her hair, still uneven, didn't matter as much anymore. What mattered was how she carried herself, how she reacted, and how she protected her own dignity. She realized that strength was not just about power, it was about self-respect, preparation, and courage. On Sunday evening, her father sat with her one last time before the week began. "Remember everything we've worked on," he said gently. It's not about them. It's about you. You know who you are. You know what you're capable of, and you know how to handle yourself. Trust that. Trust yourself. She nodded, feeling a mixture of nerves and determination. The path ahead was still uncertain, and she knew there could be challenges. But she also knew that she had built a foundation that could carry her through. That night, she went to bed with a sense of readiness she had never felt before. The fear that had once consumed her felt smaller, more manageable. The humiliation that had weighed so heavily on her heart was still there, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it became a reminder of what she had overcome and what she was capable of handling. She had transformed pain into preparation, fear into focus, and uncertainty into confidence. By the time she woke on Monday morning, she felt a quiet strength within her. The school hallway, which had once seemed intimidating, now felt like just another path she could walk with awareness. She wasn't reckless, she wasn't fearless, but she was ready. The tools her father had given her, the mental exercises, the physical training, the awareness techniques, and the calm confidence, were all in place. She was prepared not just for the bullies, but for any challenge that might come her way. And so, with her backpack over one shoulder and her heart steady, she walked toward the day ahead. Each step was deliberate, each breath controlled. She knew the bullies might still try to provoke her, that whispers and stares might still follow her, but she also knew that she had power now. The power of preparation, the power of self-awareness, and the power of her own courage. She wasn't just walking through the hallway. She was walking with purpose, reclaiming her space and proving, first and foremost to herself, that she could stand tall no matter what. The first day back at school after the weekend felt heavier than usual. The hallways, usually filled with noise and laughter, seemed louder and more crowded in her mind. She could feel the familiar tension settle over her chest as she approached the building. Every laugh, every glance from a student walking by seemed amplified. But she reminded herself of the lessons she had learned over the weekend, the breathing exercises, the awareness techniques, and the quiet confidence she had been practicing. She drew in a slow breath, lifted her chin, and walked forward with purpose. As soon as she entered the main hallway, she noticed the group of bullies leaning against lockers near the center of the corridor. They were talking loudly, laughing, and seemed to be scanning the hallway for her. For a moment, a spike of fear ran through her, but she reminded herself to stay calm. She could feel her heart beat quick but steady, and she focused on her breathing just as her father had taught her. The world slowed in that moment, and she saw the situation clearly. The bullies were trying to intimidate her, but she had a choice in how she responded. They spotted her as she drew closer. "Look who's back," one of them said, sneering. "Ready for another haircut?" The others laughed, nudging each other and glancing at her expectantly. In the past, this would have been a moment of panic, the kind that made her shrink inside. But today, something was different. She met their gaze calmly, not with anger, not with fear, but with quiet confidence. She didn't move toward them aggressively, and she didn't flinch or step back. Instead, she continued walking past them, her posture straight, her head held high. One of the bullies stepped forward, trying to block her path. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" he demanded, his voice meant to intimidate. For a moment, the crowd around them grew quiet, sensing a confrontation. She stopped, keeping her distance but maintaining eye contact. "I'm going to class," she said firmly, her voice steady and clear. "You're not going to scare me." The words were simple, but the confidence behind them carried weight. The bully hesitated, thrown off by her calm demeanor. Another bully stepped up, trying to mock her. "Oh, are you going to cry like last time?" he said, attempting to provoke her. She felt a flicker of old anger, but she pushed it aside, focusing on staying in control. She remembered her father's advice. Never let fear or anger control you. Take a deep breath, stay aware, and respond thoughtfully. She didn't answer with insults or threats. She just looked at them steadily and took a small, deliberate step to the side, giving herself space while signaling that she would not back down. The other students in the hallway watched, some with curiosity, others with admiration. No one had seen her handle the situation like this before. The bullies, used to reactions of fear or panic, were confused. They had expected the same reaction as before, but this time she was calm, prepared, and deliberate. Her body language, her voice, and her posture all conveyed the same message. She was aware, she was ready, and she would not be intimidated. The situation could have escalated, but she had prepared for this moment. She maintained her awareness of the environment around her, noting the positions of teachers and other students. She subtly adjusted her path, making sure she had a clear way to move forward without giving the bullies an advantage. Each movement was deliberate, confident, and purposeful. She had trained for this, not to fight but to reclaim her space, to assert herself, and to protect her dignity. One of the bullies, frustrated by the lack of reaction, tried a different tactic. "You think you're tough now?" he sneered, stepping closer. She didn't back up. Instead, she took a steady breath and in a calm, clear voice said, "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to go to class. You can do what you want, but I'm not giving you my fear." Her words were firm, assertive, and without anger. They carried authority because they were spoken with confidence and control. The bully froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. The crowd in the hallway began to shift, some students whispering, others staring. It was clear that the power dynamic had changed. The bullies had relied on fear and intimidation to control her, but that control was gone. She moved past them, each step steady, each movement deliberate. The whispers and stares of the crowd faded into the background, replaced by her own focus and awareness. She was no longer a victim. She was a participant in her own story, taking deliberate steps to protect herself and assert her presence. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Confidence, awareness, calmness. She could feel the strength growing within her. Not brute force, but the quiet power of someone in control of themselves. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. And in this hallway, with the bullies watching, she demonstrated that courage in real time. The bullies, sensing the shift, tried to regroup. They exchanged glances, whispering among themselves, trying to decide what to do next. One of them stepped forward again, this time attempting to grab her backpack. She reacted quickly, using a defensive movement her father had taught her, creating distance and moving smoothly past the attempt. It wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about protecting herself and maintaining control. The bully stumbled slightly, thrown off by her preparedness. Another student who had been watching from nearby stepped forward, offering support without saying a word. It was a small gesture, but it reinforced the idea that she was not alone. Her awareness and calm had not only protected her, but it also inspired others. She felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, knowing that she had transformed fear into action, humiliation into confidence. The remaining bullies finally realized that their usual tactics would not work. Their attempts to provoke her had failed repeatedly. She continued to move forward, her focus unwavering. The lesson was clear. Intimidation relied on reaction, but she no longer reacted with fear. She had reclaimed her power, one step at a time, using preparation, awareness, and quiet confidence. When she reached her classroom, she didn't rush in. She paused, taking a deep breath, feeling the sense of accomplishment. She had faced the bullies, maintained her composure, and protected herself without aggression. The experience was empowering, a confirmation that the training she had undergone over the weekend had worked. She had transformed fear into strategy, panic into calm, and humiliation into strength. Inside the classroom, she felt a mixture of relief and pride. The events in the hallway had tested her, and she had passed. She realized that true strength wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about control, awareness, and courage. She could face challenges without losing herself, without letting fear dictate her actions. The bullies had tried to dominate her, but she had stood tall, and in doing so, she had regained her dignity. Throughout the day, she noticed a subtle shift in the way others interacted with her. Some students whispered in admiration, some nodded in respect, and some even offered words of encouragement. The power dynamic had shifted, not through aggression or confrontation, but through presence, confidence, and calm. She had demonstrated that strength was not always visible in force. It was visible in the way someone carried themselves, in the calm determination that could not be shaken by cruelty. By the end of the day, the teen felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had faced the bullies head-on, used her preparation to stay calm and aware, and maintained control over her own emotions. The hallway, once a place of fear and humiliation, had become a place where she could assert herself and demonstrate her inner strength. She had learned that courage was cultivated, practiced, and reinforced through preparation and awareness. When she returned home that evening, her father was waiting. He didn't ask immediately what had happened. He simply observed the way she carried herself, He noticed the steadiness in her movements, the calm in her expression, and the quiet confidence she exuded. "How was it?" he asked gently. She smiled, a mixture of relief and pride. "I handled it," she said simply. "I didn't let them control me. I stayed calm and moved forward." Her father nodded, satisfied, knowing that the lessons he had taught her had taken root. They spent the evening reflecting on the day, discussing what had gone well and what could be improved. Her father reinforced the idea that preparation, awareness, and calm were her greatest tools. "You didn't just face the bullies," he said. "You showed yourself what you're capable of. That's the real victory." She felt a warm sense of validation. The fear and humiliation of the past week still lingered, but it was no longer overwhelming. She had transformed those feelings into strength and confidence. That night, as she prepared for bed, she thought about the events in the hallway over and over. She realized that courage was not about being fearless. It was about taking action despite fear. She understood that preparation, practice, and awareness could turn even the most intimidating situations into opportunities for growth. And most importantly, she knew that she had the power to reclaim her space, her dignity, and her confidence no matter what challenges lay ahead. The confrontation in the hallway had changed her. She had faced the bullies, used her training, and walked away with her head held high. She had learned that true strength was not in striking back or seeking revenge, but in maintaining control, staying aware and asserting oneself calmly and confidently. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that she had taken a powerful step toward reclaiming her life, one deliberate choice at a time. The days after the confrontation passed with a sense of calm and accomplishment. The teen walked through the hallways differently now. She noticed how the air seemed lighter when she didn't carry the weight of fear, how the small details, glances, whispers, laughter, no longer intimidated her. Each step she took was deliberate, a reminder that she had reclaimed control over her world. And that confidence wasn't about being popular or feared. It was about knowing her own worth. Her classmates began to notice the change too. The bullies who had tormented her before now avoided confrontations, unsure how to respond to the quiet strength she carried. The crowd in the hallway whispered, not with mockery, but with curiosity and respect. Some students who had been bystanders before began to step up in small ways, offering support or simply acknowledging her presence with a smile. It was a subtle shift, but it reinforced a lesson she had learned over the past weeks. Strength is not loud or aggressive. Sometimes the mere act of standing tall, composed, and self-assured can influence others more than anger or confrontation ever could. At home, she continued to reflect on the events and the lessons she had absorbed. Her father remained her guide, not just in training but in understanding life's challenges. "Remember," he said one evening as they prepared dinner together, "life will always have people who try to take advantage of fear, anger, or doubt. But you